Who exactly created all of this? Some say the Big Bang brought everything into existence. But who triggered that Big Bang? And who brings 30 trillion cells together into a human being with a mind and a heartbeat? If there truly is a creator, whether it's a conscious God or some form of intangible cosmic law, where did it come from itself? Was it created by a higher power, or did it exist beyond cause and effect from the very beginning? In search of the true answer, humanity has built temples, and we've also built telescopes. We search for God in scriptures. But the truth always feels just out of reach, so close yet so far. But what if the answer is hidden within the universe itself? So, over the next 30 minutes, I must blend science and philosophy together, and go in pursuit of the answer to the question you want to know most. That is, where did all of this actually come from? After watching this video, I believe your understanding of the universe will reach a whole new level. And it all starts back in 1894, in Belgium. That year, a child was born into a Catholic family. He was Georges Lemaitre. He grew up in an era where he held the Bible in one hand and pursued science with the other. Driven by his faith in God and curiosity about the universe, he entered the University of Leuven. Yet, he wasn't the type to just follow the book. In his view, whether truth is read in the scriptures or discovered through experiments, it all points to the same source in the end. Understanding the universe itself is a form of worship. When he was young, he studied engineering and fought in the First World War. The cruelty of the battlefield did not destroy his faith. Instead, it made him crave the ultimate meaning of existence even more. And so, he returned to university, switching to study mathematics and physics, while also entering the seminary, determined to do something few dared to do. To be both a scientist and a priest. It was an era when science and religion viewed each other with suspicion. Scientists have long viewed religion as a shackle on the mind. Religion, in turn, has historically suppressed science, leaving behind scars like those of Galileo. In such an atmosphere, saying that science and faith can coexist is practically heresy. But Lemaitre refused to buy into that. He believed science could explain how the universe works, while faith could answer why it exists. He didn't want to use science to prove God, he just wanted to use it to help humanity understand awe. It was precisely this conviction that allowed him to see secrets others had overlooked. Back in the 1920s, almost every scientist, including Einstein, believed that the universe was static and eternal, with no beginning, and no need for a creator. But Lemaitre, looking at the equations of general relativity, saw a different possibility. The universe is expanding. And if it is expanding, then the universe of the past must have been smaller, even condensed into a single, infinitely dense point. That was the moment of the universe's birth, a day without a yesterday. In his eyes, this aligned shockingly well with the Genesis account. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In 1927, he published his paper, proposing that the universe was expanding, and originated from an explosive beginning. The theory caused an absolute uproar in the scientific community. Some accused him of sneaking religion into physics, and Einstein even told him to his face, "Your calculations are correct, but your physics is abominable." Because to admit that the universe had a beginning meant admitting that everything once came from nothing. This made many people deeply uncomfortable. In the eyes of many scientists, Lemaitre's theory seemed to open a door for theology, challenging the secular dogma that the universe was eternal. Yet he did not back down. Instead, he continued to refine his theory, gathering evidence, building mathematical models, and making it bulletproof. Then came the turning point. The American astronomer Hubble discovered that galaxies are moving away from each other. The universe really is expanding. This observation became the smoking gun for Lemaitre's theory. It also forced the scientific community to re-examine his perspective. The term Big Bang was originally coined by Hoyle in a mocking tone. Yet, the name stuck, and the theory solidified in the face of ever-increasing evidence. By the mid-20th century, the Big Bang had become the mainstream explanation for the origin of the universe. For Lemaitre, this was not just a scientific victory. It was a validation of his convictions. Science and faith could illuminate one another. He didn't use the Big Bang to prove the existence of God. He simply saw it as a way to appreciate the magnificence of creation. He always maintained a clear boundary between science and theology. Yet he admitted that this discovery resonated deeply with his faith. Fast forward 40 years, and a young Stephen Hawking is defending his doctoral thesis at Cambridge. The topic remained that same question which had puzzled thinkers for centuries. Where did the universe come from? However, the path he took was entirely different from Lemaitre's. 20 years later, he proposed the no-boundary proposal. His views on God and the universe stood in sharp contrast to those of his predecessor. In 1963, 21-year-old Hawking was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Doctors predicted he would lose his mobility and pass away within a few years. But he not only survived, he reshaped humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Back then, he married Jane Wilde, a devout Christian. His wife's faith sustained them through their most difficult days. But as his career progressed, Hawking's atheistic convictions grew increasingly firm. By the 1980s, he had completely rejected the idea of a personal God, focusing instead on another concept, that the universe could be explained entirely without the need for a creator. The no-boundary proposal was his most ambitious attempt to pinpoint the origin of the universe. According to general relativity, gravity is the curvature of spacetime caused by mass and energy. Under extreme conditions, such as at the edge of a black hole or at the very moment of the Big Bang, this curvature becomes so intense that classical physics breaks down. Hawking had already made a name for himself in black hole research. He discovered that black holes were not absolutely black, but will instead emit radiation. This is what we call Hawking radiation. It was this work that led him to re-examine the very beginning of the universe. And when faced with Lemaitre's singularity, he wondered, is it possible that the universe never had a singularity to begin with? Armed with this question, he teamed up with James Hartle to propose a groundbreaking concept. This theory is built upon the principles of quantum mechanics, completely shattering the traditional notion that the universe must have been born from a singularity. In his description, the beginning of the universe isn't a point of infinite density, but rather a smooth, finite state. Imagine traveling from the Earth's equator all the way north until you reach the North Pole. The North Pole isn't a boundary, but rather a place where the direction north simply ceases to exist. Hawking suggested that the behavior of time at the very beginning of the universe is just like this North Pole. When you trace time back far enough, you don't hit a rigid beginning, but instead enter a curved geometric state that blends into space. He used imaginary time to explain this, treating time as a dimension similar to space. In his vision, the universe has no beginning and no end. It simply is. In A Brief History of Time, he went even further. If the universe can follow the laws of quantum mechanics and spontaneously emerge from nothing, then it doesn't need a creator to kickstart it at all. And so, he wrote that controversial line, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. To Hawking, the greatest beauty of this model is its self-sufficiency, a universe entirely governed by physical laws, born naturally and inevitably from quantum fluctuations. But not everyone is buying it. Some point out that his explanation still can't bypass an even deeper question. Where do these laws themselves come from? Why are they so orderly, and why are they just right to allow for the existence of life? If the universe is a machine, even if it's incredibly ingenious, someone still had to set the rules in the first place. In other words, Hawking only pushed the mystery one step further back. In the year 2010, the Grand Design was published. Hawking once again dropped that line which shook both the scientific and philosophical worlds. The universe can, and will, emerge from nothing. This time, John Lennox, a mathematician and philosopher of science from Oxford University, stepped forward. He argued that Hawking's reasoning overlooked the most fundamental question. Lennox was born in 1943 in Northern Ireland, a place of intense religious and political conflict. Yet, his parents were not only devout Christians. They also encouraged him to keep an open dialogue between science, philosophy, and faith. His father was a businessman, who provided him with all sorts of books from a young age, teaching him to think critically about the world. This background, growing up with both scientific inquiry and religious reflection, gave him a unique perspective. When he later confronted Hawking's theories, as he saw it, there was a fatal flaw in Hawking's logic. If there really was nothing before the universe began, then where did physical laws like gravity come from? Once you have laws, you no longer have nothing. On this point, Lennox further explained, physical laws themselves cannot kickstart everything out of thin air. They aren't entities that run on their own. They are simply descriptions of phenomena, and they require a stage upon which to operate. For example, The law of gravity can explain how masses interact. But without matter and without spacetime, gravity has nowhere to exert its influence. Without the universe itself, the laws are just empty words. Therefore, to treat physical laws as the cause of the universe is like saying the principles of aerodynamics can make an airplane grow out of the ground on its own. Without a maker, without materials, without a factory, yet expecting it to assemble itself automatically. Laws can only describe what happens under specific conditions. They cannot create those conditions themselves. In his view, although Hawking's no-boundary model is mathematically ingenious, it still relies on a pre-existing quantum field and the laws that govern it. It does indeed bypass the singularity problem, but it fails to bypass the question of where the initial conditions came from. Using quantum wave functions to explain the beginning of the universe simply pushes the question one step further back. Why does this wave function exist? And who, or what, decides its form? This is the trap of infinite regression. Every time we use a natural mechanism to explain the universe, we have to assume a more fundamental framework. And that framework itself requires an explanation. If the universe originated from a quantum vacuum, then we must ask, where did the laws governing that vacuum come from? If you treat these laws as inherent, then they themselves are a mystery. The answer might only come from an external cause that transcends the natural order. His rebuttal also touches upon the most fundamental principle of causality in philosophy. Every effect must have a cause. Hawking argued that the universe could create itself. But Lennox believes this is equivalent to saying something existed before it actually existed, which is logically impossible. To help his audience grasp this more intuitively, he often tells a legendary German tale, The Absurd Adventures of Baron Munchausen. The Baron once got stuck in a swamp, sinking deeper and deeper, on the verge of being swallowed whole. There was no one around to help him, yet he suddenly grabbed himself by his own hair, and pulled both himself and his horse right out of the muck. The audience is always amused by this story, because its absurdity lies in the fact that you cannot pull yourself up by your own hair. There is no lever, there is no external force, and there is no fulcrum. This is the fallacy of self-causation. If the universe could truly create itself, it would be like pulling itself out of the swamp of nothingness before it even existed. It sounds novel, but once you scrutinize it, it collapses just like the Baron's story. For anything to be a cause, it must first exist. If self-causation is already a logical dead end, then when you really stop to think about the meaning of nothing, this problem becomes even more glaring. The nothing here is not empty space, nor is it a quiet void. It is absolutely nothing at all, no space, no time. There is no time, there is no energy, there are no laws. It wouldn't give anything a chance to happen, because there is simply no stage for it to play out on. To say the universe could just pop out of a state like that is to assume a miracle without a creator. This means there must be an external cause, an existence outside of the universal system. It was not created itself, yet it serves as the foundation for everything else. Philosophically, this is called the uncaused cause. From Aristotle's unmoved mover to the modern necessary being, this concept has always been at the core of the debate over the origin of the universe. Unlike everything else, this existence doesn't need an explanation for why it is here. It simply is, as the ultimate source of all things. This perspective challenges the idea that the universe is self-contained and self-explanatory. It suggests that the universe is not a closed system, but rather points toward a higher level of creation, the subtlety of natural laws, the precise fine-tuning of physical constants, and the fact that we are even able to observe and comprehend these phenomena. All seem to hint at a deeper reality. It is not restricted by time and space, but is the very source of time and space. Just look at the conditions required for life to exist, and you'll realize how delicate this balance really is. If the gravitational constant were slightly stronger, stars would burn out and collapse before life could ever emerge. If it were slightly weaker, stars would never ignite, and the universe would be forever cold and dark. The electromagnetic force, if its value were off by even a fraction, atoms wouldn't be able to bond, and complex chemistry would be impossible. The mass ratio between protons and neutrons, if that were unbalanced, essential elements for life like carbon and oxygen would never form. The rate of universal expansion, controlled by the cosmological constant, if it were too fast, matter would be too diluted before it could ever clump together. If it were too slow, the universe would have collapsed back in on itself. And the precision of this constant, reaches the almost unimaginable scale of 1 in 10 to the power of 120. It's as if the universe is standing perfectly balanced on the edge of a razor. The strength of the strong nuclear force is equally vital. If it were weaker, atomic nuclei would fall apart, leaving the universe with nothing but hydrogen. If it were stronger, stars would burn through their nuclear fuel too quickly, and life could never even begin. This delicate interplay of constants forces us to ask, could such a universe really be just random? This incredibly low probability makes one suspect there is a deeper reason behind it than mere coincidence. This is what scientists call the fine-tuning problem. It has been puzzling physicists and philosophers for decades. Some scientists, like Max Tegmark, suggest that perhaps we are just one of countless universes. Each universe has its own set of rules and constants. But this idea actually just pushes the problem one step further away. The multiverse hypothesis sounds bold, but it faces an inevitable question of its own. Why does such a multiverse even exist? And what is the reason for its existence? Could it be that this highly improbable order and precise balance of the universe is hinting at something beyond mere chance, or even some form of intelligent existence? The British astronomer royal, Martin Rees, has said that the emergence of life is by no means just a random coincidence. Instead, it relies on extremely specific conditions. He and many other cosmologists emphasize that the fine-tuning of the universe cannot be explained by chance alone. It looks much more like the result of some kind of intelligent design. Physicist Paul Davies even goes a step further. He believes that the physical laws governing the universe might not have been created randomly, but are the work of a deeper intelligence. The universe not only happens to support life, its laws and conditions are precise to the point of being almost picky. Behind this, there is very likely a will beyond the universe itself that set the rules. Precisely because of this, the fine-tuning argument has become one of the most powerful scientific arguments for the existence of God. The more scientists study the universe, the less they can avoid its staggering precision. If these constants were changed by even the slightest fraction, life could not exist. This points almost directly to an intentional creator, a God who not only ignited the universe, but also personally calibrated the rules by which it operates. In the field of genetics, the voice of Francis Collins is equally compelling. As a leader of the Human Genome Project, he mapped the entire human genome. But outside the lab, he is also a devout Christian, openly discussing how faith and science can coexist. In his view, the structure of DNA, the complexity of life, and the delicate balance of universal laws are not the products of blind chance, but rather a signature left by a creator. From Penrose to Guth, many scientists have acknowledged that the precision of universal constants is almost mind-boggling. Penrose once pointed out that for the universe to exist in such a finely tuned way, the probability of this occurring is virtually impossible by mere coincidence. It's like a precision watch, it must have a watchmaker. The laws and constants of the universe, likewise, require a creator who established and set them in motion. But here's the question: if the universe needs a creator, then who created the creator? Where did this intelligence itself come from? At the Bodleian Library of Oxford University, Alistair McGrath often wanders among the bookshelves. A former atheist, he is now a theologian and a historian of ideas. He has spent countless hours there, pondering the intersection of science and faith. His scientific training makes him skilled at questioning and analysis. Yet when he ventures into the deep waters of theology, he still hits that most stubborn problem: if God created the universe, then who created God? This is what is known as the infinite regress argument. McGrath began to further dissect this infinite regress theory, to see how it challenges both science and theology. He knew that to truly understand it, he had to break down its logical structure. The core of this argument is the law of causality, a principle that neither philosophy nor science can do without. It states that every effect must have a cause, and every cause in turn leads to a new effect. The way we understand the world is by following this chain of cause and effect, from the motion of atoms all the way to the evolution of the universe. But once you apply this principle to the origin of the universe, trouble begins. Imagine you are playing billiards. The cue ball hits the first ball. The first one hits the second one hits the third. This chain reaction is easy enough to explain. The cue stick strikes the cue ball. The cue ball drives the first ball forward. The force is transferred from one link to the next. But if you take it a step further, why does the cue ball move? Because it was struck by the cue. Why did the cue move? Because your arm swung it. But how did your arm start moving? Because of muscle contractions. But what triggered those contractions? If you keep digging into this chain of links, you'll realize that every cause requires an even earlier cause to explain it. The question is, does this chain go back on forever, never finding an origin, or must it come to a sudden stop somewhere? If the movement of every ball on the table depends on an endless chain of causes, then it's as if none of them were ever truly started in the first place. In an infinite regress, the starting point vanishes, and the first cause ceases to exist. Now, zoom out and apply this logic to the entire universe. From the birth of stars to the formation of galaxies. If every event depends on an earlier cause, then where is the very first one? What set the universe into existence? According to the law of causality, there should be an explanation for the origin of all things. But if every cause relies on another, earlier cause, we get trapped in a loop that never has a beginning. McGrath knows well that this argument is tough to handle for either worldview. For atheists, it poses the question, if the Big Bang was the start, then what triggered it? And what created the conditions that existed before that? And for theists, it asks, if God created the universe, then who created God? These questions might sound logical, but they actually reveal the limitations of human thinking. We are wired to think within the framework of time and space. It's hard to imagine something existing completely outside these dimensions. To untangle this knot, McGrath turns to the concept of a necessary being. Classical philosophy and theology have both touched on this. Not everything requires a cause. Most things in the universe are dependent. A tree needs sunlight, water, and soil. Planets require gravity and the laws of physics. But a necessary being is that fundamental source which exists without depending on anything else. It is the uncaused cause. Many theologians believe that God is exactly such a being. Unlike dependent things, God's existence does not rely on any external cause, but is self-existent and eternal. This concept, by providing a fundamental point beyond which no further questioning is needed, resolves the problem of infinite regress. McGrath finds it compelling. Not because it makes the mystery disappear, but because it fits the nature of ultimate questions. Mathematics accepts certain axioms that cannot be proven yet are essential. Theology similarly views God as the ultimate axiom, the foundation of all existence. There are similar cases in science. The laws of thermodynamics in physics are the fundamental rules for energy and matter. There are no deeper principles from which to derive them, yet we must accept their existence. Zero and infinity in mathematics cannot be fully explained, yet they are indispensable elements for understanding number systems. These examples remind us that some of the most fundamental truths may lie beyond causality and deduction. Time itself is also worth contemplating. The infinite regress assumes that the chain of events extends infinitely into the past. But modern cosmology suggests that time has a beginning, which is the moment of the Big Bang. If time was born at that moment, then before the universe existed, the laws of causality we are familiar with may not apply. This coincides with the theological concept that God exists outside of time, and created both time and space. When McGrath pieced these ideas together, he realized that the question who created God actually doesn't hold water. It assumes that God also operates within the same causal framework as the universe. If God is the architect of this framework, then the question itself is like asking what is north of the North Pole. It was wrong from the very start. Scripture says, all things were created in him, whether in heaven or on earth, things visible or invisible, all things were created through him, and for him. He existed before all things, and in him, all things hold together. However, this kind of answer has also drawn quite a bit of criticism. Some people argue that proposing an uncaused cause that is exempt from the law of causality isn't really solving the problem. It's just rephrasing the issue. Why stop at God? Why not say that the universe itself is that necessary being, and therefore doesn't need a creator? This line of thinking is common in naturalism. It holds that the universe and its laws are complete in themselves. The Scottish philosopher David Hume questioned this. He argued that taking the causality we observe within the universe, and applying it directly to the entire universe as a whole, is unreasonable. Our understanding of cause and effect comes from everyday experience, but we have never experienced the birth of a universe. Therefore, any claim about the origin of the universe including the claim that God exists, is ultimately just speculation. A broader criticism suggests that causal assumptions relied upon by the argument for infinite regress may not even apply to the scale of the universe or the metaphysical realm. Some scientific models don't even require a first cause. Quantum mechanics shows that certain events can occur without a specific cause, such as the behavior of subatomic particles. If causality can break down at the quantum level, then it might not necessarily hold true at the beginning of the universe either. Critiques of the infinite regress argument don't stop at logical deduction. There are also hypotheses from cosmology. For example, the multiverse theory suggests that our universe is just one of countless others. The process by which these universes come into being doesn't need a single starting point. Some physicists and philosophers have also proposed a cyclic universe model, suggesting that the universe operates in an endless cycle of expansion and contraction. Therefore, there is no true first cause. These ideas are essentially saying that the universe itself could be eternal and self-sustaining, without needing to appeal to a transcendent beginning. Critics also point out that the law of causality as we understand it is built upon the framework of time and space. If the universe originated from a state where neither time nor space existed, then causality might not apply at all. This effectively undermines the causal chain assumption that theological arguments rely on. Naturalist philosophy, on the other hand, more directly criticizes theological explanations as filling the gaps with God. What this means is attributing the origin of the universe, which we don't yet understand, simply to God. This doesn't provide any verifiable answers. Throughout history, planetary motion and the causes of diseases were once attributed to mystical forces, but science eventually explained them through natural laws. Critics argue that the origin of the universe might undergo the same process. Even so, supporters of the theological position still insist that it provides a complete and persuasive framework for understanding existence. They point out that while the criticism is valid, there is a lack of alternative explanations with equal power. For example, the multiverse hypothesis is interesting, but still lacks empirical support. Denying causality on a cosmic scale also leaves some fundamental questions unresolved. However, this debate has an even deeper underlying assumption, that if God exists, he must be a personified being with consciousness and will, just like us. Only without limitations. But what if this assumption is wrong? What if the so-called God, or ultimate reality, isn't a creator with a personality, but rather a fundamental essence or principle? This line of thinking leads us to another way of understanding the divine, viewing God as the underlying structure of reality itself, rather than some separate, existing him. In the year 1656, Baruch Spinoza was expelled by the Sephardic Jewish community of Amsterdam, and suffered a rare and severe excommunication. This decision not only forbade anyone in the community from having contact with him, but was also permanently irrevocable. After losing the support of his community, Spinoza lived a simple life, making a living by grinding lenses, while devoting himself to philosophical research. This quiet, profound loneliness gave him the space he needed to develop his reflections on God, nature, and humanity. These thoughts later converged in his masterpieces, the Theological Political Treatise and the Ethics. In fact, the root of his break with the Jewish community was not a personal conflict, but his own subversive ideas. Long before his excommunication, he had already begun to reject the traditional concept of a personal God who intervenes in the world. He radically viewed the Bible as a document created by humans, rather than a divinely inspired scripture, treating it instead as a work of history and morality. At the time, this was tantamount to a direct assault on the very core of the faith system. What makes Spinoza so profoundly moving is how he completely transformed the way people understand the Bible and God. He argued that the Bible must be interpreted within its own historical and linguistic context, viewing it as a product shaped by human culture and political environments. In doing so, that long-held belief in eternal, divine truths was dismantled by him, piece by piece. In the Theological Political Treatise, he pointed out without hesitation that religious authorities used the Bible to maintain control over the people, keeping them trapped in ignorance and superstition. And at the heart of his philosophy lay a radical reconstruction of God. In his eyes, God is not a deity sitting on high with a human personality. Nor does he interfere with the workings of the world like some earthly king. On the contrary, God is the sum total of all existence, the essence and quintessence of the entire universe. In that vast sea of stars, galaxies spin, and stars are born, burn, and die. A singular truth runs through it all. It is not an empty philosophical concept, nor is it merely a matter of faith. It is the foundation of existence, the energy, the laws, and the wisdom that weave the cosmos together. It is not an external force, but the very flesh and blood of the universe itself. The universe is not just a pile of chaotic matter and energy, but something unified by a divine principle. Therefore, there is no chasm between God and His creation, because all things are, in themselves, manifestations of the divine. Stars, planets, galaxies, and even the gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces that govern matter, all spring from the same sacred essence. It has no boundaries, no dividing line where here begins. Everything is one, running through it all is a unified, rational principle. Natural laws are not theories invented by man, but the eternal expression of divine wisdom. Gravity is not an imposition from some distant will, but a natural unfolding of the divine. Thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, the behavior of light, all are embedded within the structure of God. Even time is redefined within His thought. It is not a timeline designed by an external deity, but a dimension of the universe itself. It is the stage upon which all things are woven together. From the birth of stars, to the rise and fall of civilizations, everything is a chapter of divinity slowly unfolding in time. Therefore, the universe is not a finished product, created and then cast aside. It is an act of continuous creation. Every moment reveals the sacred wisdom that sustains it, whether it is the birth of a star in a distant galaxy, or the flowing of a river here on Earth. Both are expressions of the same cosmic order. From the grandest galaxy to the smallest particle, everything is connected by the same principles. This connection exists not only in matter, our actions, our consciousness. These are not isolated existences separate from the divine, but chapters slowly unfolding within the cosmic plan. This means, our lives were never just random events. To understand these laws is to understand our place in the universe. If all existence is a manifestation of the divine, then every moment of life carries meaning. We do not need to look beyond the universe to find purpose. Because living itself is a reflection of the divine. Seeking knowledge, then, becomes a form of spiritual practice. To study the stars, to explore the laws of nature, it is about touching that wisdom which holds everything together. Science, philosophy, and spirituality, not walking separate paths. They are simply different routes leading to the same truth. This interconnectedness of the universe is truly humbling. If everything is part of the same divine essence, then humanity is no longer the center of the universe. We are merely one node within this vast system. We are not in opposition to nature, but fundamentally connected to it. To understand the universe, one must face the wisdom that governs all things with awe and humility. Ultimately, the universe itself is a reflection of the divine. There is no separation between the creator and the created, because everything stems from the same system. Natural laws, the structure of the cosmos, the movement of particles, are all manifestations of the divine in the material world. When we decipher these laws, we draw closer to understanding the nature of God. The revolutionary nature of Spinoza's thought lies not just in its content, but in how it liberated science and philosophy, allowing them to explore the mysteries of nature, without being constrained by religious dogma. It was precisely because of this radicalism that he faced fierce opposition during his lifetime. His works were banned, and his name became synonymous with heresy, even though he never denied the existence of God. Throughout his years of exile, he continued to write quietly and steadfastly, corresponding with the most important scientific and philosophical thinkers of his time. The infinite, impersonal God he proposed deeply influenced Einstein. In it, Einstein found a philosophical framework that resonated with his own worldview. Although he was often misunderstood as believing in a traditional God, his concept of divinity was actually worlds apart from tradition. Einstein did not believe in a God that intervenes in human affairs or possesses human traits. In a letter from 1929, he wrote, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings. For him, God was the embodiment of the laws of nature, the elegant and unified cosmic structure that science is constantly striving to uncover. Throughout his life, he rejected the anthropomorphic God of religious tradition. In a 1954 letter to the philosopher Gutkind, he stated bluntly, "The word God is for me nothing more than the expression and product of human weaknesses. And the Bible is a collection of honorable, but still primitive, legends." His inner world is rooted in a profound reverence for cosmic order and reason. He found this far more profound than any god fashioned in the image of man. This philosophy also deeply moved Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist who spoke of the cosmos to the public with such poetry. Sagan inherited and built upon the philosophies of Spinoza and Einstein. He too believed that the universe is an interconnected whole governed by the laws of nature, breathtaking in its complexity and beauty. In his classic work, he famously said, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." For him, God was not a being to be worshipped, but another way to describe the profound connection between humanity and the universe. The idea that we are made of star stuff is rooted in scientific fact. The elements essential for life, such as carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, were all forged in the nuclear fusion furnaces of stars. This cosmic lineage ties humanity into the grand narrative of the universe, and echoes Spinoza's thought that all existence is a unified whole. Sagan took it a step further. He believed that through human consciousness, the universe is able to reflect upon itself. This adds a spiritual layer to scientific exploration, portraying the pursuit of knowledge as part of the universe's own awakening. Perhaps, all these debates about God, whether it's a necessary being, Spinoza's infinite substance, or Sagan's poetic universe, do not ultimately reveal the truth of the cosmos, but the truth about ourselves. The God we shape may simply be a psychological projection, a way for us, in a silent universe, to find meaning, belonging, and understanding. If that is true, then what we are searching for may not be a God outside of ourselves, but the truth deep within, the human spirit, projected onto the vast canvas of existence. This might, in turn, reveal the nature of God and our own nature. The light flickers and shadows dance upon the ceiling. Jung sits at his desk, where the dim light carves a small circle of glow into the darkness. He is not merely a scientist. He is a seeker, with no map at all, carrying only a single, persistent question. He ventured into the labyrinth of the human soul. Why is it that humans always reach for something beyond themselves? Jung believed that the gods and sacred stories we create are not just fantasies, but a reflection of something deeper and more primal. He called it the archetype. Universal symbols and patterns buried within the collective unconscious. A psychological legacy that spans generations. These archetypes are not abstract symbols. They are living presences inside every one of us, shaping the way we see the world, and influencing how we search for meaning. Imagine yourself standing on an endless shore, where the waves stretch out to the edge of your vision, and beneath the surface lies that ancient, mysterious collective unconscious. It is not chaotic, it has currents, forms, and rhythms. Archetypes are like whales moving slowly through the deep sea. They glide through the depths, unseen, yet truly existing. These symbols carry the weight of the entire human experience. The mother, the hero, the shadow, even divinity itself. Jung was not a theorist dreaming away in his study. His ideas were born from life, from his patience, and from his own struggles. Once, a woman came to him, troubled by a recurring dream. In the dream, a radiant, godlike figure hands her a golden cup. She would wake up every time, not understanding what it meant. Jung said this was not just a prop in a dream, but a symbol, an archetype. Perhaps it represents transcendence, or the pursuit of a higher goal. But on a deeper level, it points to a longing shared by all of humanity, to connect with a power beyond oneself, and to find meaning amidst inner chaos. To him, these archetypes are both universal and deeply personal. They aren't just abstract concepts floating out in the universe. They are structures buried deep within your heart and mind. When people dream of gods, or talk about divine beings, Jung didn't take that as proof of some external god's existence. Instead, he saw it as evidence of the need and the searching within us. So, did he think God didn't exist? Not exactly. What Jung cared about wasn't whether God was actually real, but what God represents. In his view, divinity is an archetype. It is a symbol of wholeness. It is the force that brings all the scattered pieces of the self together. When people pray, meditate, or tell stories of gods, they are reaching out toward that sense of completeness, finding order in the chaos, and finding a story where their own lives can truly belong. You'll find that this is consistent with the stories we love most. Whether it's ancient myths, superheroes, or epic fantasy, they all follow a common pattern. The hero's journey. The hero is called by some force, endures trials, battles adversaries in the shadows, and then undergoes a transformation. And when we watch these stories, what we're seeing isn't just the hero. We're seeing ourselves. We are searching for meaning. We are fighting against our own shadows. And we are yearning for change. Jung's theory of archetypes doesn't just apply to deities and heroes. It also applies to how we shape our reality. Someone might walk into a church, mosque, or temple to bow or kneel in prayer before a statue. Others might think they are worshipping an external god, but Jung would say, what they are truly connecting to is their inner divinity, the deepest part of their own psyche. Rituals, symbols, and prayers are merely tools to touch that profound power. This doesn't mean that religion is an illusion. Quite the opposite. Jung believed it was essential. Without these practices, people might get lost in the vastness of existence, without any direction. In this sense, the gods we create are both a mirror and a map, reflecting who we are, and guiding us toward where we are going. Even scientists, those skeptics who view the world through equations and data and feel no need for gods, are no exception. For them, the archetype may not be a god in a temple, but rather the pursuit of truth or the thirst for knowledge. Archetypes don't belong to religion. They belong to human nature. Whether in a laboratory, a sanctuary, or beneath the starry sky, this longing remains the same. Jung's own life was a constant tug of war between science and the divine. He started out as a psychiatrist, firmly rooted in a world of reason. Yet, through his interactions with patients and dialogues with his own soul, he was drawn into alchemy, mysticism, and mythology. He wasn't abandoning science, he was expanding its boundaries. In his eyes, the human psyche is not just a simple firing of neurons, but an independent universe, full of mystery and meaning. He poured this exploration into the Red Book, a thick, richly illustrated manuscript that recorded his dreams, visions, and reflections. Within those pages, he encountered gods, demons, and archetypes, not as external beings, but as parts of his own psyche. And writing that book was, in itself, a journey in search of meaning. An effort to connect the inner world with the outer. If we take a step back and look at Jung's ideas, we realize he was actually reminding us that everyone creates gods in their life. This god doesn't have to be some ruler in the heavens. It could be a career, a relationship, or a goal. Anything we imbue with ultimate meaning becomes our god. These gods can sometimes lead us forward, but they can also consume us. The question was never whether we would create gods. It was always why we create them, and what these gods reveal to us about ourselves. If you look at the divine through the lens of science and philosophy, and through the eyes of your own heart, you will find that it is inextricably linked to our own desperate yearning for understanding. From the birth of the universe to the architecture of the human soul, everything points to one realization. God is not a final answer, but a series of questions that shape who we are. Philosophical concepts about the infinite and the eternal challenge the very limits of our logic. The notion that a creator exists beyond time and space completely upends our understanding of cause and effect. Perhaps the ultimate truth is simply not bound by human rules. Others choose a different path, viewing the divine as the very essence of existence itself, a force woven into every fiber of life, something that can never be separated from it. This kind of divinity is no longer some distant being out there. It is an internal, infinite, and perhaps even unnameable presence. But in the end, what truly drives us to contemplate the divine is not just the mysteries of the cosmos, but those deep, profound questions that give life its weight. Is God the creator of the universe? Is God the universe itself? Or is it merely a projection of our own minds? Perhaps it is all of these, or perhaps none at all. One thing is certain: our concept of God changes as we grow. It is the way we make sense of the world. It is the vessel for our hopes for the future. And it is our ongoing conversation with the eternal mystery. To me, God is not a subject waiting to be explained, but a presence waiting to be felt. A miracle that symbolizes how all things are connected and gives life its radiance. Yet, as long as we fail to see the truth of the divine, we will only continue to go in circles. We pray before statues. We bow before idols, never realizing that this supreme, immortal power has been within you and me all along. The only path to the divine is to first find yourself. Once you truly understand that, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am a divine soul, and you will realize that supreme, eternal power is the very soul shared by all life. Having watched this video, you will discover that, from Lemaitre's Big Bang to Hawking's no boundary proposal, from Spinoza's God is nature to Jung's God within, what we have been questioning has never been just the origin of the universe, but the very meaning of our existence. Who created it all? Was it a conscious God, cold, unyielding laws, or merely our own reflection in the vast void? Perhaps the answer lies not in distant galaxies, nor in ancient, heavy scriptures, but right here, in the breath and thoughts you and I share. The universe continues to expand and our questions continue to grow. Maybe one day we will find that ultimate answer. Or perhaps the search itself is the answer.